In 1971, an entire family vanished from their suburban Arizona home. Dinner left on the table. No signs of struggle. No trace of where they went or how. For decades, the case haunted the community, then faded into silence. But in 2023, a young woman buys a vintage Polaroid camera at an estate sale, one that came from the very house the Langleys once owned. Inside, a sealed film cartridge. What it captured was never supposed to be seen. Subscribe for more real-life-inspired true crime mysteries. What you're about to hear is based on a case that was buried for over 50 years. Phoenix, Arizona. September 3rd, 1971. The ceiling fan turned slowly above the Langley family's dining table, its blades catching the fading orange light of a desert evening. Shadows lengthened across the floor, stretching from the hallway to the kitchen like fingers reaching for something unseen. Dinner was still warm. 4 plates, roast chicken, canned green beans, and buttered rolls. The glasses were half full. One of them, a small blue plastic cup, had tipped on its side, its contents soaking into a paper placemat colored in crayon by a child's hand. At the table, 2 chairs were tucked in. One was pushed back, slightly angled. The last sat empty but still pulled out, as if someone had left in a hurry. A small wind-up toy dog spun in slow circles on the floor near the living room carpet, its mechanical barks now silenced by time. The family's actual dog, a terrier named Mags, scratched at the front door, whining softly. The front door was wide open. Neighbors would later say they noticed the lights were on well past midnight. That wasn't like the Langleys. Not Edward, who worked sunrise shifts at the power plant. Not Clara, who always tucked the kids in by 8:30. And certainly not Sammy and Beth, 7 and 5, who were never out of sight on a school night. But no one called the police that night. Not yet. It was Clara's sister who found the house the next morning. Everything was quiet. The car was still in the driveway. The beds were unmade, toothbrushes still damp. Clara's purse sat on the counter next to the fridge. Edward's wristwatch, cracked and worn, was in its usual spot on the nightstand. And in the living room, half hidden beneath the curtains, was the family's Polaroid land camera. Strap coiled, lens fogged with fingerprints, flashbulb spent. No bodies, no blood, no sign of forced entry, no farewell note, no ransom demand. Just a house frozen in the middle of life, abandoned mid-sentence. Within 48 hours, the search began. Dogs, helicopters, canvases, phone calls. The case made local, then national news. For weeks. Reporters parked outside the house. Psychics rode in from across the country. Theories ranged from cult abduction to carbon monoxide poisoning to Edward snapping under pressure and killing them all, though no bodies ever turned up. But slowly, as the seasons changed, attention faded. Leads dried up. And eventually the Langley house was just another tragic address with a cold history. The new owners gutted it in the 80s, stripped the wallpaper, changed the floors, painted over the nursery. But even then, the rooms never seemed to hold warmth. Renters came and went. In time, the property became a foreclosure, then an estate sale listing, buried among hundreds in a dusty storage lot. No one ever figured out what happened to the Langleys. No one even realized the camera had never left the house. Inside it, untouched for over 50 years, the film waited in the dark. Still sealed, still loaded, still holding what may have been the last images the Langley family ever saw. And in 2023, someone finally pressed develop. The heat pressed down like a hand. Not the dry, sunburned heat tourists imagined when they pictured Arizona, but the kind that seeped into your bones, thick and still and hard to breathe through. Claire Rowe stepped out of her car and immediately regretted wearing jeans. Her shirt clung to her back before she reached the sidewalk. The estate sale wasn't much to look at. Just a sagging one-story house with flaking beige paint and a brown lawn that hadn't been watered in weeks. The porch creaked beneath her steps as she joined the handful of browsers already inside. The air smelled like dust and lemon-scented cleaner fighting a losing battle. Claire moved through the living room slowly, avoiding eye contact with the older couple arguing over a grandfather clock. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She never was. These kinds of sales were her habit, a way to unwind between freelance photography gigs, a ritual she'd picked up after her mother died. Most of the time, she left empty-handed. Today, she wasn't sure why she stayed. The furniture was dated, sun-faded couches, water-stained coffee tables, a console TV that had probably last worked during the Reagan administration. An old woman in a yellow vest sat near the front door, handing out numbered stickers to buyers. "Is this your listing?" Claire asked, gesturing to the space. "Nope," the woman said, without looking up. "Belonged to a cousin of the bank manager. Place has been empty for years, never even hit the market." Claire nodded politely and wandered deeper into the house. The back room was cooler. A dusty ceiling fan clicked rhythmically above boxes labeled with peeling masking tape. The clutter was what caught her eye. Old radios, shoe boxes full of tangled cords, mismatched tableware, and a shelf of National Geographic issues from the 60s. A milk crate sat wedged in the corner beneath a pile of kitchen towels. She bent down and tugged it free. Inside, nestled among cracked picture frames and rusted cookie tins, was a camera, a Polaroid land camera model 210, heavy, cool to the touch, the kind her mother used to carry on road trips. Claire turned it over in her hands. The rubber grip was worn smooth, but the shutter button clicked when she tested it. It still had a strap. And, surprisingly, the film compartment wasn't empty. She popped it open. There was a full-sealed cartridge inside. Claire blinked. Most people left these things empty to avoid corrosion, but this one looked intact. A strip of yellowed tape stretched across the top, sealing the cartridge shut. Something had been scribbled on the tape in faded ink, almost illegible now. She tilted the camera to catch the light. "Do not develop." A chill crawled up her arms despite the heat. It could have been a prank, a joke, or some superstitious scribble from a paranoid relative. But something about it didn't feel like a joke. Still, Claire couldn't put it down. "How much?" she asked the woman at the front. "For what?" "The camera. The Polaroid. $5, the woman said. "Everything in that back room is priced to clear." Claire handed her a 10 and waved off the change. She left without looking at anything else. That night she sat at her apartment's kitchen table with the camera in front of her and a mug of lukewarm tea she'd forgotten to finish. Her apartment was a converted guest house. Small, quiet, filled with plants and books and tools of her trade. The only light came from a desk lamp angled down at the Polaroid. She ran a cotton swab along the cartridge slot, cleaned the lens, replaced the corroded batteries with fresh AAs. The camera powered on. It hummed faintly. Claire hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the film door. "Do not develop." She thought of throwing the cartridge away, or slipping it into her storage box and forgetting about it. But that wasn't who she was. Her brain was already working the angles. If the film was usable, and that was a big if, it might hold photos from the late 60s or early 70s. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was gold. She peeled back the tape. The glue had hardened but gave way with a sharp crackle. She loaded the cartridge into the camera and pressed the shutter. The machine made a mechanical whirring sound as the first photo emerged. Black, just black, overexposed or expired. She laid it on the table and tried another. Whir. The second image came out just as blank. But the third, Claire froze as the photo began to develop. A dining room. Mid-century table, 4 place settings, roast chicken and green beans. The light fixture above was old, the ceiling fan just visible in the frame. It was like a time capsule, a perfect frozen moment. But there was something wrong with it, something she couldn't quite place. She held the image closer. In the corner of the photograph, by the edge of the frame, was a hand. Just fingers, white-knuckled and curled tightly around the corner of the table. Not posed, not smiling, gripping. She set the photo down. Her heart was beating too hard now. She took another shot. The camera whirred. Another photo slid out. This time, it was a hallway. Yellow walls, family portraits on the right. The perspective was strange, as if someone was standing too close to the lens, like the shot was taken in a hurry. The final photo emerged slowly. It was the same room, but empty. No food, no plates, just overturned chairs. The light fixture above tilted slightly, its glass cracked, and in the doorway leading outside, a small shadow. A child. Face turned away. Claire leaned back, stunned. It wasn't just that the pictures were old. It wasn't just the creepiness of the photos themselves. It was the overwhelming sense that she was seeing something no one was meant to find. That these photos had been taken on a night when something had gone terribly wrong. She turned the camera over again, scanning for a name, a serial number, anything. A faint label was stuck to the inside of the strap. Langley, 428 Sycamore Street. Claire sat very still. She knew that name. Not from photography, not from history. From a podcast episode she'd half listened to last year. It was the one about the family that vanished from their Phoenix home in the 70s. The house that had never been resold. The case that went cold. The Langleys. She looked down at the photo still developing on the table. The child in the doorway was barefoot, and the shadow stretching toward them was not theirs. Claire didn't sleep that night. The 3 photographs sat like quiet warnings on her kitchen table, arranged in the order she'd pulled them. The final one, showing the empty room and the child's silhouette, seemed to darken by the hour, like it was holding something back until it was ready to be seen. She sat cross-legged on her couch, laptop open, typing keywords into a dozen search tabs. Langley family disappearance. 1971, Phoenix missing family dinner table. Sycamore Street cold case, Arizona. Family vanished Phoenix Polaroid. It didn't take long. There it was, halfway down the search results, on a website called Echo Coal Files, a true crime archive run by former journalists and investigators. The title of the entry made her stomach tighten. The Langley House. The family that vanished mid-meal Phoenix, Arizona. September the 3rd, 1971. 4 family members disappear without a trace. The article was detailed, disturbingly so. The Langleys had been a quiet, working-class family. Edward Langley worked for the Salt River Project as a lineman. Clara was a part-time church secretary. 2 kids, Beth, 5, and Sammy, 7. No history of debt. No custody battles. No criminal background. The last confirmed sighting was at the grocery store around 4:30 p.m. A neighbor reported seeing Edward watering the front lawn around 6. By 8, the lights were on, but no one answered the door. By morning, the house was silent. Clara's sister found it just like the photos Claire had pulled. Food on the table, nothing touched. Door wide open. Police arrived within the hour. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no bloody footprints, no suicide notes. Just a home that looked like its inhabitants had simply stepped out of existence. The case spiraled quickly into the surreal. Rumors of cult activity. UFO sightings in the desert that week. A man who claimed he saw the Langley children walking along Route 17 with a woman in a yellow dress, but who later recanted after failing a polygraph. What struck Claire the most was the final paragraph. Among the household items found at the scene was a Polaroid Land Camera Model 210. It was logged into evidence as inactive. The film compartment was empty. The camera disappeared from evidence storage sometime in the 1980s, most likely auctioned or discarded during departmental downsizing. The original chain of custody was never recovered. Claire leaned back from the screen. Her hands were shaking again. The camera she found was the camera from the case. She grabbed her phone and opened her notes app, jotting down everything she knew so far. It was how she worked, like piecing together a visual puzzle. She needed to see the timeline, map it out, trace every clue until something clicked. Then she paused. If she had the camera, if the film was original, that meant the photos she developed had never been seen by investigators. These were undeveloped at the time of the disappearance, which meant one terrifying thing. Someone, likely the person responsible, had taken them, then left the camera behind, assuming the film would never survive. It had. And now it was speaking. The next morning, Claire drove to the Phoenix Public Records office. The building was cool and gray inside, all vinyl tiles and humming fluorescents. She signed in, gave her ID, and asked for public access microfilm on the Langley case. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a librarian's gait, took a long look at her. "You a reporter?" "Photographer, working on a personal project." The woman didn't press. She disappeared into a back room and returned 5 minutes later with a box labeled Langley, E. Disappearance case number 71-9204. Claire slid into a viewing booth, fed the first roll into the machine, and began turning the dial. The old headlines blurred by. Missing family. Stuns community dinner table still set. But where are the Langleys? Police. No leads, no suspects. In vanishing case. She paused at one article from September 7th, 1971. The front page included a black and white photograph of the dining room, taken by police. Claire squinted. The shot was nearly identical to the one she had developed at home. Same angle, same lighting. But something was missing. In her photo, the hand gripped the corner of the table. In the police photo, that part of the table was cropped out entirely. She flipped to the report details. Several lines were blacked out. Note: film recovered in camera was blank. Possible light exposure. Camera logged. No further analysis requested. Object considered non-evidentiary. That made no sense. Claire knew how durable old film could be. Even if light damaged, fragments should have shown up. But someone had clearly written off the film. Or lied. She leaned back, staring at the screen, unsure if what she was feeling was adrenaline or fear. Something about this case had been deliberately buried. That night, Claire called her friend Dominic Tran, a forensic technician she'd met 3 years ago while shooting a documentary series on cold cases in Flagstaff. He owed her a few favors. "Are you sitting down?" she said after he picked up. "I'm literally slicing pizza over the sink. What's up?" "I need you to run a name through your system." Raul Dreyfus paused. "That's random. It's a lead connected to a missing persons case from 1971. I found photos, ones that were never logged." Dominic sighed. "You're serious?" "I have the actual camera." She heard his breath catch. "Okay, I'll check, quietly. But if it's an active investigation..." "It's not," she said. "It's ice cold, but now it's thawing." Later, Claire couldn't stop staring at the photo with the child. She took out a magnifying lens and examined the edges. The shadow behind the child. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't furniture. It was a figure. Tall, angular, unmistakably human, but wrong. The head was slightly too large for the shoulders. The arms, long, like the elbows bent the wrong way. The face was turned just enough to suggest features, but blurred beyond recognition. Not by motion, but by intent. Claire sat frozen in her chair for a long time. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She pulled out her recorder and hit record. Log Entry 1, Langley House, Polaroid film recovered. 3 photos developed. First, dinner table, full meal, hand visible in frame. Second, hallway, partial blur, off-kilter angle. Third, room empty, child in doorway, unidentified figure behind them. Film appears original. Timestamps missing. Investigative materials from 1971 confirm similar room setup. Evidence suggests someone remained in the house after disappearance, possibly a 5th person never identified, beginning independent investigation. She turned off the recorder, and for the first time in her life, she felt like the photo had taken her picture back. Claire didn't leave the apartment the next day. The 3 developed Polaroids now sat in protective sleeves inside an archival box she used for high-value prints. But she couldn't stop looking at them. Every time she did, the 3rd photo, the one with the child and the shadow, seemed to shift just a little more, like it didn't want to be still. She spent the morning digitizing the images with her DSLR, adjusting light levels and contrast, running them through photo enhancement software on her laptop. She didn't add anything, just clarified the shadows, trying to tease detail out of the grainy film. It wasn't just a figure behind the child. It was a man, or something close to one. Broad shoulders, elongated neck, arms strangely rigid at his sides. No obvious face, just the suggestion of a mouth, slightly open. The figure stood halfway in the hallway, as if caught mid-step. It hadn't been posed, it had been caught by accident. The timestamp metadata was corrupted, of course. Old Polaroid film never had digital time signatures. But the dust on the lens, the streaks on the emulsion. Claire could estimate the shot had been taken at, or just after sundown. The final light before a house went dark. She opened a new project folder on her desktop. Langley, photographic evidence, raw, and started uploading the files. By noon, Dominic called. "I ran the name you gave me," he said. "Raul Dreyfus. There's no record in any major state database. No driver's license, no arrest record, not even a DMV entry for the 1970s. "What about property records?" Claire asked. "Anything tied to Sycamore Street?" "There's one hit," Dominic said. "Deed transfer for 428 Sycamore in 1981 from county repossession to a trust named Desert Willow Holdings. The trustee on file? R. Dreyfus. So he took control of the property after the Langleys vanished?" "Looks that way. Might have been a shell name. I dug into Desert Willow Holdings. It dissolved in 1983. No tax returns, no business filings, just vanished." Claire's heart started to race. Dominic, if this guy staged the disappearance and then bought the house through a trust, it's not just suspicious, it's premeditated. "I know," he said, "but that's not even the weirdest part." He paused. "I looked up the original forensics from 1971. The film was logged as damaged, declared blank, but guess who signed off on the analysis?" Claire waited. "Detective First Class Vernon Dreyfus." Her skin prickled. "You think they were related?" "Same last name. Small city department back then. Would have been easy to fudge paperwork, especially if you wanted something to disappear." Claire stared at the camera sitting on her desk. "I have Vernon Dreyfus's signature scanned," Dominic added. "Want it?" "Yes. Send everything." That night, Claire pulled the blinds and set the photos out again. She placed the 3rd image, the one with the child and the man, under a large magnifying glass and tilted the lamp low. Then she saw it. In the top right corner, barely visible unless the light hit just right, was a sliver of reflection in the hallway mirror. It wasn't part of the figure. It wasn't the child. It was someone else. A 3rd presence, a face, watching. Claire staggered back from the table. No matter how she angled the lamp, the reflection remained. A warped face with vacant eyes. Wide, close to the mirror, as if whoever it was had been hiding just out of frame. She grabbed her notebook and wrote, "3rd person visible in mirror. Reflection appears too high to be child, possibly observer or photographer. If Langley family is gone, Who took the final photo? She stared at the question for a long time. Then she circled it twice. 2 days later, she drove to 428 Sycamore Street. She hadn't meant to go. She told herself it was just curiosity, but when she passed the street on her way to a shoot across town, something in her gut twisted. She made a quick turn, parked, got out. The house stood exactly as it had in the photos. Single story, chipped white paint, overgrown shrubs choking the windows. A real estate sign hung crookedly on the chain-link fence, half covered in vines. For sale. Bank-owned property. No entry. Without Agent Claire walked the perimeter slowly, camera slung over her shoulder. She shot a few wide angles from the sidewalk, framing the front porch, the kitchen window, the cracked walkway leading up to the door. It was quiet. Too quiet. She moved to the side gate and found it unlocked. Slipped through. In the backyard, weeds stood chest high. A rusted swing set leaned against the fence. One of the chains hung loose, the seat lying flat in the dirt. The slider door was boarded shut. Claire raised her camera, but just before she took the photo, she felt it. A presence. Like someone was standing behind her. She spun around. No one, just dry grass and the groan of cicadas. Still, she didn't take the shot. Instead, she backed out of the yard, returned to her car, and locked the doors. As she pulled away, she glanced back through the rearview mirror. The curtain in the front window moved, only slightly, but enough to know it hadn't been the wind. Back home, Claire transferred her exterior photos onto her computer and began processing them. She zoomed in on the front window. The curtain had parted, and behind it, half hidden in shadow, was a face. Not a reflection. Not pareidolia. An actual face. Wide eyes, pale skin, the nose flat, almost pressed against the glass. She enhanced the exposure slightly. Her stomach dropped. It was a girl. Young, maybe 10 or 11. Not Beth. Not from the original photos. Someone else. Claire grabbed her notebook. Face in front window. Appears to be girl. Who is she? Why is she inside? She circled the entry, underlined it, then sat back, unable to breathe. If the house was empty, abandoned, then who was still living there? Later that night, Claire posted anonymously on an old cold case forum she used to visit back in college. She included stills from the photos, heavily watermarked and cropped to protect the originals, and asked one question. Has anyone connected the Langley disappearance to Vernon Dreyfus, former detective? Any relatives? She didn't expect an answer, but by morning she had a private message. From Eyes Open, 1976. I grew up near Sycamore Street. I knew the Langleys. I also knew Vernon. You're not wrong to be digging, but be careful. People tried before. A local journalist in 1985. Woman from the college newspaper. Both ended up quitting or disappearing entirely. This isn't a story. It's a burial site. I can meet you, but only in public and only during daylight. Claire stared at the message, heart pounding. She typed back, name a place. The diner smelled like bacon and floor wax. Claire sat at a corner booth with her camera bag beside her and a recorder in her coat pocket, turned on and running. She watched the front door with growing nerves, scanning each person who entered. She hadn't told anyone where she was meeting her source. She deleted the forum message thread as soon as they'd agreed on the place. Eyes Open 1976 had chosen a family-style diner just off Interstate 17, a place called June's Breakfast House, open since the 1960s, mostly filled with truckers and retirees. Public, safe, bright. But still, Claire felt a pit at the base of her stomach. At 10:17 a.m., the bell over the door chimed. A man in his mid-50s walked in, dressed in a faded army jacket and jeans. He had a face that had once been square and strong, but was now softened by time, lined, leathery, alert. He moved cautiously, scanning the room the same way she had. Their eyes met, He gave a nod and walked toward her. "Claire." She stood. "Your eyes open." "Name's Thomas Bell," he said, sliding into the booth. "Used to live 3 doors down from the Langley house. Back when I was a kid." Claire took him in. He looked like someone who didn't trust easily. Probably hadn't for a long time. "You're not a cop?" he asked. "No." "FBI?" "No." He finally relaxed a little. "Good." Cops had their chance. They didn't take it. They ordered coffee. Thomas didn't speak until the waitress left. "I still remember that night," he said. "September 3rd, 1971. I was 10 years old. Lived on Sycamore Street my whole life until I was 20. My dad was a mechanic. My mom taught piano." He sipped his coffee, then looked her in the eye. "I heard the Langleys vanish. But they didn't vanish, Claire. Somebody took them." Claire kept still. "Do you know who?" Thomas glanced around. No one nearby was listening. "I can't say for sure, but I'll tell you what I did see. That night, around 8 o'clock, I was in our backyard, looking for our cat. Our fence backed up to theirs. I saw someone at their sliding door. A man. He was tall, big shoulders. I thought it was Mr. Langley at first, but then he stepped into the porch light." He looked away. "It wasn't Edward." "What did he look like?" Thomas didn't answer right away. "You ever see someone and just know something's wrong? Not because they're doing anything, just because of the way they feel in a space. This guy didn't walk like he belonged in that house. He moved slow, deliberate, like he was acting, but didn't understand how people are supposed to move." Claire's throat was dry. "I only saw him for maybe 10 seconds, Thomas said. Then he turned and closed the sliding door. Lights inside went off a minute later. After that, the house was just still." "Did you tell anyone?" "My dad, but he said I was imagining things, said I was being dramatic, that the Langleys probably just went on a trip and forgot to tell someone. The police came the next day. I told them what I saw. Know what they did?" She shook her head. "Nothing. They didn't even write it down. One officer patted my head and said I had a vivid imagination, told me not to talk about it to the neighbors." Claire took out the digitized photos and laid them on the table, flipped over for privacy. "I found these, in the original camera, from inside the house. You need to see them." He hesitated, then nodded. She turned them over one by one. The dining table, the hallway, the child in the doorway with the looming figure behind, and then the enhanced crop of the mirror showing the watching face. Thomas stared at them for a long time. Then he exhaled sharply and said, "Jesus, that's not Edward Langley," Claire said. "That's someone else. Maybe the man you saw." He tapped the mirror image. "That's not a reflection from inside. Look at the height, the way the eyes are level with the hallway trim. That person's standing in the wall." Claire blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean behind the mirror. That part of the house had an access crawl space, an old one. I remember from when the Langleys had some plumbing redone in '70. My dad helped with the job. The mirror is built into the drywall, but there's room behind it." Claire leaned forward. "So someone could have been hiding?" Thomas nodded slowly. "That house has dead spaces, crawl tunnels, storage gaps between walls. It was built cheap and fast in the '50s. It's like a honeycomb in there." Her mind raced. The child in the photo wasn't just in danger. They were being watched from multiple angles. Claire lowered her voice. "Do you know anything about Vernon Dreyfus?" Thomas looked up sharply. "I haven't heard that name in years." "He was lead detective on the case. Signed off on the film evidence as blank. Later acquired the house through a shell trust." Thomas's jaw clenched. "That doesn't surprise me. Dreyfus was dirty. Everyone knew it, but no one had the stones to say it out loud. He was obsessed with that case. Spent more time in that house than anyone else. My dad said he kept going back at night, even when the investigation was closed." Claire's skin crawled. "Why?" "Don't know. but people said they saw lights on when it should have been empty. Sometimes a car parked down the street with the lights off. Dreyfus died in the 90s. Heart attack, I think. But the whispers never stopped. Some say he wasn't just covering something up. They say he lived there for a while, in secret. Claire looked down at the photos again. Then, who's in the house now? Thomas didn't answer. Back at home, Claire uploaded her interview recording and filed it alongside the photos. She stared at the enhanced mirror image, now digitally cleaned and sharpened. What if the house had never been empty? What if it had always been watching? She opened her recorder again. Log entry 2. Interview with Thomas Bell, eyewitness from 1971. Confirmed sighting of unknown male at Langley residence same night of disappearance. Description matches figure in third photo. Possible hidden access behind hallway mirror. Implies second photographer or observer. Next step. Re-enter 428 Sycamore. Document wall interiors. Investigate crawl space. Attempt contact with current occupant, if any. She closed her laptop, heart pounding. Then she packed her flashlight, gloves, and camera. Because if the answers weren't in the photos, they were still inside the house. Claire waited until just before dusk. She parked 2 streets over from Sycamore, changed into dark jeans and a black hoodie, and a packed light. Just her camera, a small LED flashlight, latex gloves, and a crowbar wrapped in a towel. She told herself this wasn't breaking in. It was reclaiming evidence. Something had happened in that house, and if the system wouldn't chase the truth, she would. As she walked the last 2 blocks, the wind picked up, scattering dry leaves across the sidewalk. The neighborhood was quiet. Half the houses looked vacant, the rest too run down to have security systems. The Langley house sat like a bruise in the middle of it, forgotten and fading, its porch light long dead. Claire ducked behind the side gate and slipped into the backyard. The slider was still boarded up. She knelt by the window nearest the back of the house. The same room shown in the second Polaroid. The screen was rusted at the corners. She pried it off carefully, then pressed her hands against the glass. Unlocked. She hesitated only a moment, then pushed. The window groaned upward on the warped rails. Claire slid inside and landed in the dining room. It was cold, colder than it should have been for an Arizona evening. The air inside felt still, unmoved, like it had been sealed for decades. She clicked on her flashlight and swept the beam across the room. The wallpaper was peeling. The light fixture above the table hung crooked, missing one bulb. Dust coated every surface. The room was frozen, almost just like the Polaroid. But the table and chairs were gone. So were the plates. Only a faint rectangle of cleaner floor tiles remained where the table had once stood. She made her way to the hallway. The floor creaked under her feet, the sound loud in the silence. She passed a faded family photo, Edward, Clara, Beth, and Sammy. All smiling. Beth wore a blue dress with white daisy buttons, the same dress as in the police report, the same dress from the photo. Claire kept moving. The hallway ended at a door, closed but not locked. She pushed it open. It was a bedroom. Pink wallpaper, sun-faded and peeling. Stickers of cartoon animals dotted the closet door. A child's room. The window had been painted shut, and the room smelled of old fabric and dry air. She turned back toward the hallway, and stopped. To her left, halfway between the dining room and the child's bedroom, was the hallway mirror. Large, oval, framed in black painted wood. It was clouded now, but unmistakable. This was where the reflection had been captured. Claire reached out and touched the glass. Cold. She knocked. Hollow. She stepped back and examined the wall. A faint seam ran around the mirror's frame, just wide enough to suggest it wasn't flush with the dry wall. She pressed along the edges. One corner gave way. A panel popped loose with a quiet snap. Behind it, darkness, a crawl space. Claire slipped on her gloves, pulled out her flashlight, and crouched down. The opening was tight, maybe 3 feet tall. She angled her headlamp and slid in on her stomach, pulling herself forward on her elbows. The space stretched behind the walls like a narrow tunnel. Beams, old insulation, pipes. She coughed as dust rose around her but kept moving. After 6 feet, she hit a junction, another passage branching off at a hard right, toward what would have been the living room wall. She turned. The beam of her flashlight caught something ahead, something that wasn't wood or pipe. She crawled forward until it came into focus. A cot, metal-framed, covered in filthy blankets. Next to it sat an overturned crate used as a makeshift table. On it, a water bottle, an old lighter, a torn comic book, and a Polaroid photo, face down. Claire's breath caught. She reached forward and picked it up. It was another image from 1971. Same film, same type. This one showed a close-up of a little girl's face. Beth Langley. She was crying, her eyes red and swollen. Her hands were tied in front of her. The background was too dark to place, but the flash illuminated enough. The child had been photographed after the disappearance. She turned it over. In faded ballpoint pen, someone had written, "She still cries, but not for long." Claire felt the panic rise in her throat. She turned off her light, held her breath, listened, and heard it. Breathing. Not hers. Shallow. Raspy. From deeper inside the wall. Claire backed up slowly. Her elbows scraped insulation. Her knees caught on something sharp. She didn't dare turn the light back on. The breathing grew louder, then stopped. She crawled faster, heart thudding, lungs burning. She twisted out of the crawl space and fell back into the hallway, gasping. Her hands shook as she reattached the panel, pushing it flush against the frame. Behind the wall, something scratched softly against the wood. Not violently, not fast, just enough to let her know it was there. She grabbed her bag and ran for the window, climbed out without closing it, hit the yard and sprinted through the gate. She didn't stop until she reached her car. That night, Claire sat on her bed with the new photo laid out on her pillow. Her hands still shook. She recorded a new log entry. Log 3, evidence recovered from crawl space behind hallway mirror. Polaroid image shows Beth Langley post-disappearance. Confirmed physical distress. Message on back implies ongoing captivity. Suggests at least one family member survived for extended time. Crawl space inhabited, recently. Evidence of water, comic, sleeping cot. Heard active breathing while inside wall. No known occupant of house listed in property record. Returning tomorrow with backup. Bringing Thomas. She closed the recorder, and then locked every window in her apartment. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk, replaying the sound in her head. The low, steady rasp of breathing from inside the crawl space. Not animalistic. Human. She'd heard enough to know the rhythm of lungs. Not panic, not fear. Someone had been watching her. She stared at the Polaroid photo of Beth Langley lying on the desk under a sterile reading lamp. The image was clearer now, cleaned up through Lightroom, clarified but not less disturbing. Beth's hands were bound with coarse rope. Her hair had been cut unevenly. The lighting was harsh, the kind used in basements or closets. A flash with no diffusion, but it wasn't just the girl. Claire had zoomed in. In the left side of the frame, behind the child, near her shoulder, was the soft curve of something metallic, almost hidden behind shadow. The corner of a camera lens. Someone had taken a picture of the photographer. She called Thomas Bell just after sunrise. "I need you to meet me. 10 a.m. sharp. You okay?" "No," she said, "but I think I found where they were kept, and I wasn't alone." There was a pause. "Send me the address again," he said. "I'll bring a pry bar and a crowbar, just in case." They met at a gas station near the Sycamore neighborhood. parked Claire's car behind a shut-down dry cleaner, and walked the remaining blocks in silence. Claire had brought her camera, gloves, flashlight, recorder, and a new item. A handheld Geiger counter, which Dominic had mailed overnight from Flagstaff. Not to check for radiation, but for electrical activity and magnetic interference. Anything odd behind the walls. "I don't want to be surprised again," she told Thomas. "You won't be alone this time." They entered the house through the same window. Inside, it was just as cold. The smell was stronger now, something faintly organic, like mold or mildew, mixed with the lingering musk of old insulation. Claire led him to the hallway. "This is it," she said. "The mirror, the hidden spaces behind this panel." Thomas examined it, nodded, and carefully pried it loose. The panel came off clean, and the tunnel gaped open like a mouth. "You really crawled in there?" "Yeah," she said. "And something was in there with me." Thomas clicked on his flashlight. "Let's confirm." Together they entered the crawl space. Claire crawled behind him this time. Her gloves scraped wood and wire. She pointed out the cot, the comic book, the photo. Thomas picked it up, turned it over, and read the message. "She still cries," he murmured. "Jesus." He sniffed. "There's something else." "Do you smell that?" Claire nodded. "Yeah, I couldn't figure it out." Thomas pushed farther, rounding the corner where the tunnel branched. He shone the flashlight ahead and stopped. "Claire," he whispered. "There's more." She crawled up beside him. Ahead, in the narrow space behind the drywall, were boxes, stacked 2 high, 3 wide, nearly blocking the passage. Someone had used the crawl space like a storage unit. Claire's heart pounded. They pushed one box forward. Inside, film cartridges. Dozens, all vintage, all unopened, all labeled in small, spidery handwriting. September 1971, hallway, not developed. October 1971, girl in blue, good framing 1972, teaching room 1974, broken doll 1979, watcher in mirror. Claire's stomach twisted. "These weren't photos taken by the Langley family," she whispered. "They were taken of them, and after." Thomas opened the next box. Inside, Polaroid photos, developed, curled with age. They weren't just of Beth. Some were of Sammy. Some showed Clara, alive, sitting in a chair with her wrists zip-tied, eyes closed, mouth taped. One photo showed all 4 members, posed, standing stiffly in the dining room. A date was scratched into the border. April 1972, a full 7 months after they had officially vanished. Someone kept them alive, Claire breathed. For months, maybe longer. She flipped through the stack. Some images showed strange environments. Concrete walls, narrow bunks, metal doors. A basement, a fallout shelter. Others were worse. One image showed Beth sitting beside an older woman Claire didn't recognize. Both wore matching blue dresses. The girl looked glassy-eyed. The woman's face was turned away. Another image showed cameras, dozens of them, stacked neatly in a wooden cabinet, all different models and ages. All pointed toward a chair in the center of the room. A setup, a studio. Whoever did this, Thomas said, they didn't just hide the Langleys. They documented them. They pulled out the 3rd box and found audio tapes, reel-to-reel cassettes marked with handwritten labels. Session 4, obedience. Beth learns the mirror game. Clara interview, she cries again. Claire stared at them in horror. He recorded everything. She took a photo of each box, carefully labeled and documented everything. Then she paused. "What if this isn't all?" she said. "What if the crawl space connects somewhere else?" Thomas scanned the area. "There," he said, pointing. "That side wall runs parallel with the garage. There might be a false wall on the other side." They backed out slowly, returned to the hallway, and opened the door that led to the attached garage. It smelled of rot and old paint. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like drapes. The back wall was uneven. sloppily painted over. Thomas ran his fingers along the molding. "Help me." Together they pushed. A soft pop of air escaped as the false panel gave way. Behind it was a narrow storage space, and in the center, a camera, mounted on a tripod, pointed toward the wall, a light above it, a red button beneath the lens. Claire stepped closer. It was recording. The light was on. The battery was full. A wire ran from the base into a power outlet built into the wall. "Someone's been here," Thomas said. "Recently." Claire examined the camera. She touched the button. The light blinked off, the red indicator light. Now dark. Her heart dropped, because for that light to be on, someone had been recording them the entire time they were in the house. They fled. No photos, no more searching. They climbed out the same window and didn't stop until they reached the street. Claire had one hand on the recorder the whole way. Later, back in her apartment, she documented everything. Uploaded photos, marked the GPS metadata, saved copies in 3 encrypted drives. Then she sat in the dark, shaking, because whoever had lived in the Langley house hadn't just captured the family. They'd been waiting for someone else to find it. And now, they had. Claire didn't open the footage until the next morning. She'd slept on the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees until the screen dimmed. She kept the apartment dark, the curtains shut tight, every door locked. The Polaroid photos and film boxes were stored in a fireproof safe she'd bolted to the floor the week before. And still, she didn't feel safe. She woke up just after 5 a.m., the sky still dim outside, her mouth dry. The memory card from the tripod camera burned a hole in her mind like a hidden infection. Whoever set it up had wanted to watch. She just didn't know if they still were. Claire made coffee, took a deep breath, and powered on the external reader. The files loaded quickly. Old interface, no password protection. A folder marked simply /rec/inside. 12 video files. Time-stamped, all recent. The most recent one was dated 2 nights ago. Claire opened it. The screen went black for several seconds, then static. Then an image appeared. Her, entering the hallway, crawling into the wall, leaving the frame. Then, minutes later, crawling out again, disheveled, breathless, stumbling down the hallway in panic. The audio was faint, but present, her own breathing, her voice. "Oh, God." The next file showed her and Thomas, re-entering, speaking quietly, crawling together into the crawl space. Claire paused the video. Her face was clearly visible. So was his. They'd been watched from the moment they entered, watched by someone who hadn't stopped recording. The earlier files were worse. One dated from 3 weeks ago showed a different woman. Younger, blonde, dressed in hiking gear. She came alone, entered through the same window. She held her phone up like she was live streaming, but she didn't speak. Claire fast-forwarded. The girl moved room to room, stopped at the hallway mirror, touched it. Then, jump cut. The screen cut to static for 6 seconds. When it returned, the girl was sitting in a chair in the dining room, motionless, staring off screen. Her hands were in her lap. Her mouth was moving, but no sound came out. She didn't blink. Claire rewound, re-watched. The time code proved it. There were 6 minutes of missing footage. Cut manually, erased. And whoever filmed it had restitched it to resume mid-sentence, as if nothing had happened. Claire opened another file. It was empty, just a blank room, a still hallway. But every few minutes something subtle shifted, like the angle changed, like the camera itself had moved. She opened one more. The camera faced the hallway mirror. At 2:03 a.m., a figure passed behind the glass. Not reflected, not lit. Just a flicker of motion behind the wall. Then another flicker. Then 2 pale hands, small, childlike, pressed softly against the inside of the mirror from behind. Claire slammed her laptop shut. An hour later, she met Thomas at a park near the freeway. Neither of them wanted to go to the house. Not yet. She brought a burner phone, the Polaroid prints, and a USB drive with the camera footage. "I've seen the videos," she said without preamble. "He's watching the house in real time." "From inside?" "I don't know. Maybe not anymore. But recently, yes. There's footage of us, footage of others. He's still recording." Thomas wiped his face. "This is more than just obsession. He's feeding on it." Claire handed him the USB drive. "I need to do something bigger," she said. "This can't just stay on my hard drive." "You mean go public?" "Not yet, but soon. I want backup first." Real proof. Thomas paused. "You know what I remember about the Langleys? They were good people, quiet, kind. Edward helped fix my dad's truck when it stalled during a storm. Clara used to bring us leftover pies." Claire looked down at the photo of Beth. "I think someone kept them in that house for years, then moved them, and I think the person who did it is still nearby." Thomas frowned. "Vernon Dreyfus is dead." Claire nodded. "But what if someone else picked up where he left off?" That night, Claire posted anonymously again on the Cold Case forum, this time with a blurred image of the second Polaroid, the hallway photo. She included an edited version of the reflection. No context, just a message. "For those still watching, we see you now. And we have your film." The reply came 5 hours later. From a new user, Shuttered Eyes 1973. "Then you know where it ends. Go back to the cellar, behind the water line, under the crossbeam. One last roll remains." Claire reread the message 6 times. She hadn't posted any details about the crawl space, or the mirror, or the basement. Whoever sent that message had been in the house recently, and they were giving her a lead, or bait. The next morning, she and Thomas returned to 428 Sycamore. They brought masks, gloves, headlamps, and bolt cutters. The side window opened without protest. The air inside felt heavier now, like something knew it was being hunted. They went straight to the garage. The far wall was damp. A thin copper water line ran through the dry wall near the floor. Beneath it, just where the message had said, they found a loose section of wood beam, softened by time. Claire pried it back. Inside, a cloth bundle tied tight. She pulled it free. Inside were 4 items: a roll of undeveloped Polaroid film, a small pendant necklace with a cracked locket, a burned photograph. Only the edge remained, a boy's shoe and part of a fireplace, and a note, folded, yellowed, written in a woman's hand. Claire unfolded it with trembling fingers. "To whoever finds this, we are still here. He won't let us leave. He makes us pose. He makes us lie. He says if we smile, he'll bring food. If we scream, he turns off the lights. I don't know if anyone remembers us, but if you do, find Beth. Please. Clara Langley." Claire stared at the signature until her vision blurred. Thomas reached for her shoulder. "We found them," he said softly. "Even if it's too late, we found them." Claire wiped her eyes. "Number." "We're not done, because if Beth's still alive, he might still have her." And somewhere, waiting to be developed, was the last photograph. Claire drove straight from Sycamore Street to her friend Dominic's lab in Flagstaff, 4 hours north and 5,000 feet higher. The desert gave way to pine, the heat softened into cool wind, and still, the weight in her chest didn't ease. The film roll sat in a padded archival case on the passenger seat, cushioned like it was made of glass. It was still sealed, unopened since at least the 1970s. The cloth bundle had reeked faintly of smoke, and the burned photograph tucked beside it haunted her. The partial image of a shoe, a fireplace, and scorched paper curling at the corners. Something told her that wasn't just any photo. It was a warning. She didn't call ahead. Dominic owed her more than one favor, and he wouldn't ask questions. He worked out of a university basement lab used for restoring fire-damaged documents and fragile negatives, mostly for the archives department. She parked, grabbed the film, and went inside. Dominic raised his eyebrows the moment he saw her. "Claire Rowe, I should start charging you rent. I need your best scanner, a controlled darkroom, and maybe moral support." He glanced at the case in her hand and the expression on her face. He didn't ask. "Room 3, let's see what you've got." Inside the lab, Claire pulled on gloves and laid the cartridge on the table under a clean light. She moved carefully, treating the thing like it could detonate. It was a Polaroid 108 pack, extremely rare. The chemicals were likely unstable, and the film could be degraded beyond use. But there was a chance. Claire gently peeled the paper seal. The hiss of dried adhesive gave way, and the roll inside gleamed dull silver in the light. "Still intact?" Dominic asked, watching from the corner. "Surprisingly," she said. She loaded it into a restored camera, the same model as the one from the Langley house, and pressed the shutter. The camera made its mechanical whir. A photograph slid out into her hand. Black, expired. She laid it aside and tried again. Another whir. This one developed slowly. Not black, not empty. She turned it toward the light. And froze. It was Beth Langley, but older. She stood barefoot on a concrete floor, wrapped in a blanket, her face half-shadowed. A small chain dangled from her right ankle, barely visible near the floor. Behind her, the outline of a fireplace, the same one from the burned photograph. Claire's voice was tight. "This is post-1971, at least by a decade. She survived," Dominic whispered. "He kept her alive." Claire shook her head. "Number not just alive. He raised her." She developed the next shot. Beth again, sitting at a table, a Polaroid camera in front of her. But she wasn't looking at it. She was looking past it. Toward someone. Toward whoever was holding the real camera. Her expression was blank. Not afraid, not angry, just resigned. "Next one," Dominic said. Claire pulled the third photo. A blurry image of a man's back. Tall, wearing a black shirt. He was standing in front of the fireplace, hunched over something. There were shelves behind him filled with film boxes, photo albums, and what looked like IDs, passports, laminated cards, names. Claire leaned in. "I need a loupe." Dominic handed her a magnifier. She studied the shelves carefully, squinting at the IDs. One had the Langley surname, another Charlotte Lee, a third Wendy Stone. Different names, different faces, all young women, all with the same distant eyes. "Claire," Dominic said, his voice suddenly strained. She looked up. He was pointing at the next photo developing on the tray. It showed Claire herself, sitting in her car, taken from a high angle, recent. Her hair was pulled back. She was on the phone. She remembered that moment. It was outside the grocery store 2 days ago. Her throat closed. She hadn't seen anyone nearby. No one had approached, but someone had been close enough to capture her through a long lens. They were being watched. Still. Dominic started sealing the photos into sleeves. "This is serial. It's organized. He's documenting everyone who gets close. You're next." "No," Claire said. "Beth is." Dominic looked at her, confused. Claire pulled out her phone, scrolled to the photo of the girl in the window. She opened the enhanced version. "Remember this? From 2 weeks ago. The face in the Langley house. The one we thought was a girl. I've run it through facial matching. You know who she most resembles?" She zoomed in, placed the Polaroid of adult Beth beside it. Same eyes, same cheekbone curve. "It's her." Dominic blinked. "But she'd be in her 50s. Claire nodded slowly. "So it's not Beth. It's Beth's daughter." Claire pulled out her recorder. Log 4. Subject identification. Final undeveloped film confirms Beth Langley survived at least into her mid-20s. Images indicate continued captivity and eventual adaptation. Subject shown with camera, possibly forced to document others. Multiple IDs visible in background, suggests wider operation. Latest image in roll appears to be surveillance photo of myself, taken 2 days ago. Conclusion: the man behind the camera is still alive, still watching. And Beth's child, presumably born in captivity, remains in the Langley house. She turned off the recorder. Dominic stared at her. "What do we do?" Claire's answer was instant. "We go back." The sky over Sycamore Street was flat and gray when Claire and Thomas returned. They parked 2 blocks away. No cameras this time. No bags. Claire wore a fitted jacket with her audio recorder tucked deep in the inner pocket. Thomas carried nothing but gloves and a roll of duct tape, just in case they had to force entry again. They stood across from the Langley house for a long minute in silence. It was quiet. Still. Just like before. But someone had been in that house recently. Someone had taken Claire's picture. And someone, maybe Beth Langley's daughter, was still inside. They crossed the street and walked around the side. The gate was unlocked. The back window, now familiar, opened with a groan. Claire climbed in first. Thomas followed, his boots crunching over dead leaves scattered on the floor. Inside, the house felt warmer, lived in. The dust wasn't quite as thick. The scent of rot was fainter. A hallway light was on, dim, yellow. Claire looked at Thomas. "That light was off last time." He nodded once, jaw tight. They moved carefully down the hallway. Claire stopped in front of the mirror. She touched the frame, warm, then movement, behind the glass. Not a shadow, not imagined. A hand, pressed gently against the other side. Small, pale, not dirty, not afraid. Claire whispered, "It's her." The hand didn't move. Claire spoke softly, "I know you're there. My name is Claire. I'm not here to hurt you." A flicker, just the edge of a face in the reflection. A girl, 11, maybe 12. She had Beth's eyes. The same slope to her nose, same soft chin, but her expression, it wasn't frightened. It was expectant, like she'd been waiting. Thomas stepped forward. "We're here to help," he said gently. "We've seen the pictures. We know what happened here. You don't have to stay." The girl blinked slowly. Then she mouthed something. Claire leaned in but couldn't hear it. The girl mouthed it again, more clearly this time. "He's still here." Claire's stomach dropped. "Who? Where?" The girl stepped back into the darkness and vanished. Claire knocked softly on the glass. "Wait, please." Nothing. Thomas turned toward the hallway. "We need to find the way in. That's not just a crawl space. She's living in the walls." Claire scanned the molding again. The mirror frame. Her fingers found a seam beneath the left edge. She pressed. A panel shifted open. Behind it, a door. Small, wooden, hand-built. A latch rusted nearly shut. Thomas pried it open. Inside, stairs, descending. They led down into the cellar. The air changed as they stepped inside. Colder, wet, heavy with mildew. They descended the stairs slowly. Claire flicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting through thick shadows. The cellar was larger than expected, 20 by 30 feet, reinforced with concrete and wooden beams. Along the walls were shelves, crates, cabinets, a mattress, a space heater, a plastic tub of clothes, a bed of blankets in the corner. Someone lived here. Thomas whispered, "This isn't abandoned?" "She's been here recently." Claire moved toward a shelf lined with books and notebooks. Most were filled with drawings, simple pencil sketches. A girl in a dress, a woman tied to a chair, a man with a camera, a mirror, a hallway. Each sketch was labeled in a child's hand. She flipped one page. "Mama cries too loud." Claire stopped. She flipped another. "I hide when he comes. I hide in the wall." And another. "He says I am the camera now." Suddenly, a footstep. Upstairs. Claire and Thomas froze. Another footstep. Heavier. Claire killed the flashlight. The cellar dropped into pitch black. The sound came again. Creak. Then another. Someone was in the house. Claire moved behind a support beam, pressing her back to the cold concrete. Thomas ducked beside a shelving unit, silent. The footsteps came down the hall, then stopped above the stairs. For a long moment, silence. Then, a voice. Low, male. "You shouldn't have come back." Claire's skin went cold. The voice was deep, measured, calm. "Do you think I don't know who you are?" he said. "You walk into my house. You touch my things. You steal what isn't yours." A pause. "Beth taught me how to spot people like you. Curious, hungry. You don't want truth. You want a story." Thomas looked at Claire, his eyes wide. "Go," she mouthed. "Now." She reached slowly for her recorder, clicked it on silently in her pocket. The voice continued. "She tried to run once. So did her daughter, but the house keeps them, like it keeps me." Another pause. "She's mine." Then, a door slammed upstairs. Footsteps, running now. Away. Claire waited 10 seconds, then 20. Thomas emerged first. "He's leaving." Claire grabbed her flashlight, turned it on again. She scanned the room for the girl. Nothing. She moved to the mattress, pulled back the blankets. There, a trap door, barely noticeable, hidden beneath. She opened it. A narrow shaft, ladder built into the concrete, a tunnel leading under the house. Claire turned to Thomas. "She has another exit. She's still alive. We need to get out before he comes back." They didn't use the stairs. They went through the tunnel. It was damp, cold, crawling with spider webs. But it came out beneath the broken fence 2 blocks away, in the alley behind an abandoned house. They ran, didn't stop until they hit the main road. Later that night, Claire uploaded the recorder audio to her laptop. She listened to his voice again, calm, collected, possessive. She opened the last sketch from the notebook. A girl behind a mirror. A woman in chains. And in the corner, drawn faintly in pencil, a man with a camera. Smiling. The next morning, Claire filed an official report with the Prescott Police Department. Not under her own name. Not yet. She created a secure folder, encrypted, time-stamped, cataloged, and submitted audio clips, photographs, and GPS data using a burner laptop from a library computer. She flagged the contents anonymously. Possible evidence. Child in danger. Suspected female minor in concealed space at 428 Sycamore Street, believed born in captivity. Psychological and physical risk ongoing. Immediate intervention required. She included 1 audio file, the man's voice from the cellar, and 1 photo, the girl's reflection in the mirror. She watched the progress bar until it hit 100%, closed the browser, and left. By midday, police cars had surrounded the Langley house. Claire parked 2 streets away and watched from a nearby hilltop through binoculars. 6 officers, 1 van. A crime scene tent was erected over the front yard. The window she had used to enter was now boarded shut. A woman in a department windbreaker spoke to someone with a clipboard. Another man, likely from CPS, stood with a medic at the side entrance. Claire's chest tightened. Then she saw her, the girl, wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, eyes wide, barefoot on the grass. She was holding a small stuffed rabbit, hair matted, but alive. Claire watched as paramedics approached gently. The girl didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just kept glancing over her shoulder, back toward the house. Later that evening, Claire met Thomas on his porch. "I saw them bring her out," she said. "She looked like Beth." Thomas nodded slowly. "Did you hear what they found?" "No. They're calling it a survival bunker, but it was more than that. They found 3 rooms, all hidden beneath the house, connected by reinforced tunnels, cameras, journals, food stores. a studio Claire's stomach turned, and a burned mattress, chains on the floor. What they believe was a confinement room. She had been kept there, Claire. That man, we don't even have a name yet, he raised her in total isolation. Claire looked down at her notebook. And Beth. Thomas hesitated. They're still looking, but there were blood traces in the deepest room, old, stained into the concrete. Claire closed her eyes. I think she died down there. I think he buried her beneath the house. Or worse. Thomas said nothing. Claire spent that night digitizing the sketches from the basement. Each one a testimony. She filed them in a folder marked Witness, Child of House. Some drawings told of meals in silence, of being taught to speak only when spoken to, of being made to reenact photos from old Polaroids, posed like her mother, posed like others. She recorded another log. Log 5. Police have recovered an unidentified female child from the Langley residence. Child appears to be Beth Langley's biological daughter, based on photographic and genetic indicators. Forensic search confirms presence of confinement rooms, torture equipment, audio evidence submitted. As of tonight, perpetrator remains unidentified. Possible connection to Vernon Dreyfus still under investigation. Next objective, locate Beth Langley's final resting place. She ended the log and stared at the blank screen. Beth's voice had never been recorded, her face frozen only in photos. But her daughter had drawn the truth. The next morning, Claire received an encrypted message. From Shuttered Eyes 1973. You saw her, but not him. Basement wall, south corner. There is a cabinet. Behind it, the original negatives. Claire didn't wait for Thomas this time. She drove to the crime scene perimeter, parked, and walked until she found the right officer. She held out her press credentials. I'm not here to interfere, she said. But I have information. There's something in the basement, behind the south wall. The officer was reluctant. Then Claire said the name, Langley. 5 minutes later, she was escorted inside. The house no longer smelled of mold. It smelled like chemicals from the evidence team. Air purifiers ran in the hall. Plastic sheets covered the furniture. Yellow tape marked every room. Claire stepped down into the cellar once more, this time with gloves, a badge escort, and 2 detectives standing nearby. She moved to the southern wall. There, she said. The cabinet was bolted to the cement. 2 men helped her pull it free. Behind it, flush with the concrete, was a narrow slit. One of the techs reached in with a hook, pulled out a sealed box. Inside, dozens of negatives, all dated, all marked. Claire flipped through them. Photos of Beth, Clara, Sammy, Edward. Photos of other women, other girls, hundreds of frames. And at the bottom, wrapped in wax paper, one final image. A Polaroid of Beth Langley, dead, face up, her hands folded on her chest, a bouquet of pressed violets laid across her ribs, a handwritten caption, Final exhibit, the quietest she ever was. Claire held the photo with shaking hands. That was it, the last moment, the truth, the closure no one wanted, but needed. She left the house an hour later. The girl had been taken into protective custody. No name given, no statement made, no word on the man. Claire suspected he was gone, like Dreyfus, like the others, swallowed up by systems too blind or too broken to act. But Beth was no longer a name in a report, and her daughter no longer lived in the walls. That night, Claire uploaded her final episode, a podcast titled simply, The House in the Photograph. She included the voice, the photos, the drawings, the tape from the crawl space. She redacted names, blurred faces, but she told the truth. And by morning, the world was listening. Claire's podcast hit 1 million downloads in 3 days, not because it was sensational, but because it was real, raw, human. She didn't dramatize the story. She didn't beg for attention. She simply told the truth. How a family disappeared in 1971. How a photograph reemerged 52 years later. How a daughter, born in silence, watched the world from behind a mirror and waited. Claire left out names, protected the girl. She didn't say where the Langley house was, but she included one audio clip, just 18 seconds. A girl's voice, quiet, echoing through the recorder. He said I came from pictures, but pictures don't hug back. That one line spread across the internet like fire. Forums dissected it. Advocates amplified it. Survivors of captivity, of abuse, of loss. They reached out to her by the hundreds. But not everyone believed. Some called it fake, a performance. Others said she'd fabricated evidence, staged the crawl space. One email simply read, "Truth doesn't come from ghosts." Claire ignored the noise. She knew what she'd seen, what she'd heard, and what the girl had drawn in charcoal, over and over again. The man with the camera. The authorities officially released only part of the case. They acknowledged the discovery of a child inside a sealed portion of a condemned home in Prescott Valley. That she was nonverbal at first. Malnourished, but stable. Estimated age, 11. DNA linked her to Beth Langley. The report avoided the word captive. They avoided the word project too. But Claire knew better. The girl hadn't just been locked away. She'd been raised under surveillance, programmed to reenact, taught to mimic the same poses her mother had been forced into, again and again, until the images repeated like scripture. 2 weeks after the raid, Claire was invited to speak with Agent Miriam Calder, a federal profiler brought in after the photographs surfaced. Calder wore a brown suit and no jewelry. Her office had no decorations except for a single framed newspaper clipping of a solved child abduction case from 1983. She offered Claire tea, which she declined. Then she got to the point. We believe the man behind the camera was not Vernon Dreyfus, but someone who worked with him, possibly inherited his material, possibly even his methods. Claire nodded. There were dozens of names in those negatives. Some had dates well into the 1990s. This didn't end with the Langleys. No, Calder said. And we're investigating that now. She paused. Would you be willing to consult? Claire blinked. Me? You found her? Calder said. You made the noise we couldn't. That child was weeks away from starving. Your work gave her time. Claire felt her throat tighten. She said nothing. Calder slid a photograph across the table. It was one of the burned IDs from the studio shelf, partially intact. Claire stared at the name. Wendy Stone Dobb, 1977. Disappeared from a rest stop outside of Tucson in 1985, Calder said. Never found. We believe she may have been housed in the same system, same cellar layout. We think Beth may have been forced to care for her. Claire swallowed. So she wasn't alone down there. Calder shook her head. None of them were. That night, Claire sat on her balcony under the stars and stared at the quiet street below. She hadn't gone back to Sycamore Street. She couldn't. But she had the drawings, the tapes, the voice, and the names. She pulled out her notebook, started a list. Beth Langley, Clara Langley, Samuel Langley, Wendy Stone, Charlotte Lee, Leah Anton, Rachel Black, Eden Avery, girls whose faces had appeared in those frames. Some blurry, some posed, some screaming, all frozen in that house, in that system. Then she added one more. The girl in the mirror. No name yet, no birth certificate, no fingerprints on record, only drawings and silence. But she was real, and she had survived. Claire recorded a new episode, not for the public, just for herself. Log 6, Names in the Dark. There is a girl. She's out now. She wears different clothes, eats hot food, but her eyes are still scanning doorways. The man who raised her may be gone, but the rooms remain. There were others. Names on film, faces in drawings. This wasn't a single house. It was part of something larger, and someone, somewhere, is still watching. But now, we are watching back. She ended the recording, then added one final entry to her list. Watchers. No address, no face. Just the word, and the promise that this story wasn't done yet. The girl sat quietly in the therapy room, her feet tucked beneath her in a patch of sun. She didn't speak much yet. Sometimes she answered with nods, other times with pencil drawings. They'd given her a notebook, blank pages, no lines. Today she had drawn a window. Through the glass, a woman was reaching in, arms outstretched. A camera hung at her side, unopened. The girl had drawn herself on the other side of the window, reaching back. Above the image, she had written just one word, found. Claire stood on the other side of the glass, the real one, a two-way mirror between her and the child. She didn't wave, she didn't cry, she just watched. The therapist beside her spoke softly. "We've started calling her Lily." "Is that her name?" "No," the woman said. "She won't give us one, but she liked it when we said it, so it stuck." Claire nodded. The room was warm, bright, toys scattered on the floor, soft music in the background, a far cry from the concrete cellar she had lived in for years. "She's drawing more now," the therapist added. "Every day, and yesterday she asked for colored pencils." Claire smiled faintly. "She's coming back to herself," she said, "or maybe finding who she was supposed to be." 3 weeks later, Claire received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a VHS tape, a pair of gloves, and a single Polaroid photograph. It showed the side of a different house, a boarded window, faint handprints on the inside of the glass. She played the VHS tape on an old deck at the university archive. The screen was static at first. Then, a basement. A woman tied to a chair. The date in the corner, 1986. The name scrawled at the bottom, Wendy Stone. Claire watched for 6 minutes, then stopped. She placed the tape in an evidence bag, took it straight to Agent Calder's office. "They're still out there," Claire said. "This wasn't one man. It was a network." Calder looked grim. "We think you're right. And now we have our first traceable location, Tucson." Claire nodded. "I want to be involved." "You already are." That night, Claire recorded her final episode in the house in the photograph series. Log 7. Exit frame. The girl from the cellar has a name now. She walks in daylight. She draws in color. But her past still lives in the shadows, rooms lined with cameras, corners taped with secrets. Beth Langley died beneath her own house, but her daughter lived, and her drawings told us more than photos ever could. This isn't the end. It's just the last frame of one reel. The projector keeps spinning. The watchers are still out there, and now we watch them back. She paused, then added one final line. "For Beth, for Lily, for the ones we missed. We see you now." Epilogue 2 months later. Undisclosed location. Lily sat at a desk, crayons scattered around her. She drew a sun, a field, a small house with blue shutters. Then, in the bottom corner, almost as an afterthought, she drew a woman. Thin, gray dress, hollow eyes, watching from the edge of the field. Her name was written in faint, perfect handwriting, Miss July. The case had never mentioned that name. Claire would see the drawing the next morning and freeze, because in the photo archives recovered from the crawl space weeks earlier, one of the photo boxes had been labeled July Series, Initiation. And next to it, in another child's drawing, Miss July always smiles. The frame widened, the mystery deepened, and the house still stood. Empty now, but never silent.